Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wesley Guild SA. My name is Palesa Matanyani, and today we are talking about a very interesting topic: life in the manse, whichever way you decide to call it. We are talking about Nabantwana, babafundisi. Today we've got brother Bongani Mabunda, umulimo Lisia Tsolofelo, Ketabile, and Rebotile Nkumise. So they will be telling us more about growing up in mission and being bana ba baruti, and they will just give us the gist of it and probably just go deeper into the perceptions that we have about the PK, as we may call it. But before we start, I would like to ask Omam Greta Makwenkwe to please open for us in prayer.
Thank you so much. Let us pray. Thixo namandla onke mdali wezulu nomhlaba, Thixo mhle ufana imbeko nozuko. Ngalo mzuzu siza Thixo phambi kobuso bakho. Sicela ubulumko kuwe, sicela ingqiqo kuwe. Sicela indlebe Thixo zomamela moyandini wesisa. Uthi wena njengoba uThixo bakho mzali wethu uphulule Thixo apho ufanele uphulula khona, uphilise, ubophe mzali wethu udume ngokulunga, bind wounds that are there mzali wethu udume ngokulunga, heal wounds that are there moyandini wesisa. Wena njengoThixo phephisa Thixo abo abasazayo abantwana mzali wethu, sibulela ubukhulu bakho nenceba yakho nomoya wakho Thixo wethu, imfesane engaka yobaba abantwana mzali wethu bangalo mzuzu babe kule ndawo bakwazi Thixo wethu share experience zabo ezizawunceda abanye nezawukhulisa abanye nezawulumkisa abanye, nobulela umoya wakho Thixo wethu through it all wanguThixo wanemfesane ngabo. Siyakubulela singabo bodwa nabo bonke abantwana bethu Thixo elizweni lethu, wena njengoThixo khunga ngabo, ubavikele Thixo ngofefe lwakho. Zonke izinto sicela siyazi uyasenzela egameni nasegazini kaYesu Kristu Nkosi yethu, amen.
Amen. Enkosi kakhulu, Mama. So with everyone that is watching here, you know the drill. If there's anything that it is that you want to say, if there is anything that you would like to ask, or even add on to today's session, you can just drop it on the comment section and we will direct it to our guests today. So how this is going to work today is that Uput is going to lead the conversation for us. It's going to be quite an interactive one where everyone will be giving their 2 cents worth and their opinion. So it's going to be a bit informal. And I would like to invite everyone to just join in, have their questions ready, have their comments ready, and let's have fun and learn something from today's session. So once again, chill, relax, pay attention, and let's learn something. Let's take something away from today's session. Over to you, Putbongani.
Thank you very much, Uspalisa. Mangbingelele wonke umuntu that is in the panel. Abantu basemakhaya that are watching this on Facebook or all the stream or that are streaming live for this session. First and foremost, I think I would love to say thank you for this opportunity that we as children of the manse can be able to say something to people who are probably, I don't want to use the word ignorant, but people who don't know. How are we being hurt, but not them being aware of that they are actually hurting us? To some, it's a norm. That's how the life's supposed to be and all that. To start with, Nje, I can say, to be a PK or to be Umtwana Wase Mission, you are caught up into two lives where you are caught up between heaven and hell. The hell part of it, it's what you experience more than the heaven. The heaven. And the heaven part of it is where you are introduced ulo abazali bakho because you want to live the life and become an extra example. Umntana omfundisi uyishwa engakazali. And the reason why I'm saying this is because by the time we are born, already there is a curse upon us that says, "Ilahle alilzali ilahle, ilahle lizala umlotha." And you'll realize that in most cases, abantwana babafundisi, they are always stigmatized because balilahle elingazi eliphuma bangumlotha ophuma elahleni. And when you actually question that, you will realize that the society out there has always perceived umntwana omfundisi as eccentric or have, defiant behavior. And that defiant behavior will always make umntwana omfundisi ukuthi azabaleke nesonto. And that's the stigma that it's there, without actually even realizing the fact that the reason why abantwana babafundisi abaningi, maybe we are stigmatized within regards to alcohol and all that, is because of the pressure. People who grow up during my time or in my time, the best corner that you can run to is alcohol. And because you are running away from the pressure that you see within the man's house. We were living in the mission house, and the mission house, as a child of the minister, you are not going to get any freedom in that space. During our days, the second steward would use the mission house as an office. I'm just making an example. And on every day, it could be 10 times a day or 20 times a day, you will find a knock on the door, kuzobona ubaba umfundisi. And ezobona ubaba umfundisi, akuna space se family. Your father, it's not there, he's there, but he's not there. And the worst scenario that you will encounter is when you start to be rebellious about that, I'm studying or I'm doing that, then you are always reminded that this is a mission house. And you always now have to walk the walk. You are not born at any time. And whilst you are doing that, and whilst you are thinking that, you see tears coming down your parents. And most of the reasons would be, stipend. It's for the third month or the fourth month, there is no stipend. If there is no stipend, there is no bread in the house. There is nothing that we can be able to eat. And you get into an environment where now will be called in their meeting. I don't know how many people have been into a quarter meeting. I've attended so many few of the quarter meetings, seeing how the so-called Christian people will hammer my father and how they will tell him how useless he is and how the tears will drop, seeing my father at his head. The next day in the morning, the very same people are the first one to eat inside, and he's supposed to be blessing them relevantly to that. In my life, I have seen omama bomthandazo, the ones that are supposed to bring things together, insulting my mother and showing her that she's not going to be the president omanyano. Uyini yena ngoba kusumfundisi akaqhashwanga kule sonto, wabizwa umfundisi okanye kwabizwa umama. And when you go home, when you get home, the first thing that you see in inyembezi zikaMama, because ebuya emthandazweni. Njengomntana umfundisi ahlali kahle. And now you change your life, and your life becomes in an environment whereby anything that you see from the father, the tears that you see from your father, the tears that you see from your mother, you then become the bridge to hold them together. You now become a parent in an environment where you are supposed to become a child. Ukukhula njengomntana omfundisi kunzima kakhulu when it comes to a scenario of changing circuits. I'll make an example with myself. When I started school speaking Zulu. Those who know, in the olden days, the first language was Zulu. My father was changed to be stationed in the Free State, in Bloemfontein. There is no Zulu in Bloemfontein. And what came into my head and then into my mind, oh, by the way, umntana omfundisi ilahle, akusilahle umlotha. Umfundisi akamzali umfundisi. So it means then, mina njengangane umfundisi, no one cares about my education. No one cares about my family values. And no one cares about my well-being. Then where must I run to? And all that will come up again with the stigma everywhere you go. you will be actually regarded as holier than thou, because umntana umfundisi. If I have a friend, Usipho, we probably do something naughty, the both of us. Usipho can come out scot-free, but when njengomntana umfundisi, you will get the punishment more than any other thing because ungumntana umfundisi. No one takes abantwana babafundisi as ordinary people. There is that stigma, you know, and that stigma has sat with us more than any other thing. I mean, I look at my church, when you could ask me what made you to be so angry and so aggressive, if it goes to that point, I'll tell you that the church separated the love of my father and my mother. Because my mother had guts enough to say, I'm not going to sit here insult mama bomthandazo, I will pack my stuff and go out of the mission house. It's worse because we are always reminded that the mission house there's sometimes these people are afraid to tell our fathers, they tell us as the children. How painful it is to walk in the streets and be always reminded last week. And which child is always going to be asked that? But the good part of everything is, you know, when you grow as umntwana mission, you try by level means to play your part. Playing your part, you are always there within regards to whatever church obligations need you. I grew up singing in the choir. I grew up being a YMG member. I've been a YMG member since 1987. I'm like 34 years being a YMG member. And that by itself saved my life. The very same God that my father was preaching, the very same God that the Christians, so-called Christians, were mocking him whilst he was bringing them to salvation, I saw the God. I remember when the days when my father would preach and the pulpit will crack. You know, I remember the days when my father would preach and sing and people will see salvation. And when that happened, fortunately, I was next to him and I saw what people were seeing. And that's what kept me in the church. That's what not actually has made me to run away from the church. And more than any other thing, this stigma that has always been there. I have always said, I want to prove everybody wrong. Not with being in the church, I'm proving everybody wrong, but to say umntana umfundisi can become a better thing. We are not the clones of our fathers. The people who are called into ministry, it's our parents. I'm not called into ministry, and God forbid, I don't want to be called into the ministry after the experience I've seen within my livelihood. I wouldn't have an experience, I wouldn't want my children to go through the experience, any experience in the mission house. You know, the funny thing is, when my father passed on, I couldn't mourn him, but in a way, I celebrated that maybe because everywhere you go, there is that stigma, there is that touch that is following you. And everybody is expecting you to become an angel. And that by itself, it was a killer. In our church, our ministers, our parents are there to serve. Our mothers are there to support their husbands. But it's our mothers that cries more than any other thing, looking at their husband being insulted, you know, character assassination by people that you don't know, but where the church has brought you to say, and mambuzu baba no mambuzu mama, mama sisahlaleleni kule nkohlakalo esiphakathi kwayo. Athi hayi ubaba mntanami ngibiziwe. Ngize ngumusa wenkosi. Ubona inyembezi zikama. Ubona inyembezi zikamama ziphuma zehla imhla namalanga, and aziphumi nje on an ordinary day. Ziphuma ngalela langa meke buye emthandazweni wabomama. That day, mama, my mother will never come back from any gathering being happy and say, you know, we prayed today. My mother will come back from there crying, say, we don't have family to fall in. That's why we are singular there. And for me, I'm grateful that this platform has been created so that probably the wounds that I'm carrying can stay with me and doesn't go with the next generation, where it can have a stop. And I hope this generation can be able to look at us as ordinary as possible. Singabi naleya stigma esihleli kuso, or more than any other thing. Ngiyabonga.
Thank you, Brother Mabunda, with the story that you just shared with us. It is interesting to hear of the violences enacted upon you, albeit symbolic, in the sense that you're being reminded always that emishini agugini. And I can imagine a childhood interrupted and overtaken, because you were saying of how the home was always, so to speak, invaded, because every now and then there was a knock and a reminder that aguginila. We will come back to that during the discussion, but I just wanted to thank you on journeying with us, or showing us what journeying through the life in a manse was like for you. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, one heart, one way, good evening. My name is Ratabile Zilila, and I'll be facilitating the talk for the night. Our next speaker is Umulimo Lisia. I've been informed that speakers have 5 to 10 minutes to engage, and I would also hope that they introduce themselves thoroughly enough. For now, I will hand over to our next speaker, Umulimo Lisia. And as Usis Palisa did say, if questions arise during the speakers' deliberations, please write them down in chat and we will revert to them and relay them to the speakers for the evening. Thank you very much. Over to you, Umulimo.
Thank you, Retabile. Good evening, brothers and sisters. One heart, one way. My name is Umulimo Lisia. I'm the son to the late Reverend Khotso Lisia. I was born in Kimberley and raised in Bloemfontein, currently worshiping at St. Luke's Methodist Church, and currently studying. I'm currently a second-year theology student at the University of the Free State. And as Ubud Bongani has already mentioned, the church has sometimes been to us something like a mini heaven and a mini hell. So it is not that it is only the negatives that are going to come out, but the positives have always been coupled with the negatives. And it is unfortunate that we do not react the same because of the strength of our character being unique. And so I'll be completely honest with some of the things, if not all of the things that I'll be mentioning, being sensitive. Allow me to highlight firstly the fact that I'm a minister's child who grew up in a manse that is neither located in the area of the church nor owned by the church. My father was an ordained minister in the MCSA, whose full-time ministry was not necessarily in circuit, but served as a chaplain in the police service. In other words, for those who do not know, my father was an ordained minister who once served in a congregation, and after ordination found that his calling included ministering to those dedicated to protecting law and order. And many think that chaplains or those in secondment are not necessarily ministers in active ministry, which is not true. They account to the church as ministers in circuit do, and the only difference between their ministry is that the minister in the circuit serves in a congregational setting, but the one who serves as a chaplain or in secondment serves pastorally to a certain field of work, if I could use the word, serves in a very contextual setting. You find others serving in the Department of Health, Correctional Services, Social Development, Department of Education, even so forth. It's different for everyone. And in this case, my dad was serving the SAPS and exercising his gifts and talents that would be applied in this specific context that could not necessarily be fulfilled fully in a congregational setting alone. And he would also emphasize that it is the church that has granted him the opportunity to serve in this manner that he has served. When the church feels that it is right to recall him and say, you are needed in circuit ministry, that is what the church would do. And before I even mention any challenge, it is important to note that the nature of my father's ministry allowed me to see ministry in a more broader and dynamic sense. It made me realize that ministry, especially ministry of word and sacrament, is not limited to that of the congregational setting, but it made me realize that even if you may be called to ministry in the same place and at the same time, the context in which we serve and how we serve are not necessarily the same. And so my father, being an ordained minister, serving as a chaplain, allowed me to see how plentiful the harvest is, and that we should not have a fixed idea of what church is, of what church should be. More so, it influenced how I saw my calling to ministry. They may not necessarily be rooted in the structure of the church, but in the priesthood of all believers, and allowed me to appreciate the honor that comes with being a servant of God and seeing how God uses even us as the worst of sinners to integrate, to unite, but most importantly, to heal and to transform. But digging more into the nature of his ministry, by virtue of ministering to those who are serving as policemen and policewomen, we, as children of the manse, saw my father finding himself dealing with broken individuals who don't easily address the psychological negative aspects of their field of work. An example is a policeman being called to a house and just finding someone's brain stuck on the fridge after hearing a gunshot. And the nearest person would be Mfundisi Ulisia, not to only counsel the families, but work together with psychologists to counsel the policemen who are psychologically and spiritually affected. It would include dealing with families running to the chaplain's manse, like an instance where there was abuse in a policeman's house, knowing that policemen deal with violence every day, sometimes being violent themselves and taking that violence home. Other families would go as far as referring to my dad, who's the chaplain, as the official pastor was Sekai, because he's the only pastor that the husband, being the policeman, understands because he knows and relates to his field of work. An example would be two wives living in completely different areas who do not know each other, calling my father and saying, Mfundis, tell those men to send money at the end of the month. Because if they don't, they will spend it on alcohol and unnecessary stuff. And he would need to remind them of their moral obligation to provide sufficiently and to not be careless with their finances. And other duties would be included when he would be on standby, even when he's not on duty, because he can be called at any time to deliver news of a death of a policeman to the family, be it day or night. And that would be apart from counseling, apart from pastoral visits, morning devotions, other administrative duties he has to attend to, and sometimes church commitments he's been invited to take care of. And as a result, and I'm sure other ministers' kids will relate, is that because of the immense pressure that the minister faces and bears on his or her shoulders, there comes a time because of the ministerial obligations and its pressure, your father or your mother, no matter how much they try to show that they can be there for you, because of this pressure and immensity of their work, they become emotionally unavailable. And when it came to a point where in my father's depression, he would say to me, if you want to talk to me, read my mood, feel the energy. And if you see that I cannot attend to you, set a time for us to speak so that my heart can open up. Now, I remained very angry for a long time because it felt as though I had been treated like a congregant who needs permission to have access to the pastor, when all I wanted was my father, really. And so congregants themselves sometimes forget that as they see a parent and a companion in the pastor, there's a child who sometimes needs them and has had to learn to live with this loneliness and still navigate his relationship with God amidst the demands of ministry. And as if that is not enough, because of these gaps in the relationship between the child and the minister, when the minister passes away, the child is left to pick up these pieces. It is even, in fact, worse for those who are sometimes involved in the church. I've met ministers' kids who are so over-involved in the church, not because they actually love it, but because their voices are not heard at home, and their parents thinking that this child has found his or her place spiritually, even serving in organizations, only to realize that their activeness is a result of lack of attention at home, and that attention being sought at the building next door, which happens to be the church. But I've also met ministers' children who, after their fathers passed on, have felt quite neglected by the church in their grief. There is this assumption that by virtue of growing up in a minister's home, you will have the right tools to deal with your grief. And others find themselves in a dichotomy where they do not know who to trust when in need of pastoral care because of the level of betrayal and sabotage that happens between ministers themselves. And as if that is not enough, others who have genuinely grown up loving the church are sidelined and ill-treated after the shadows of their fathers has moved from them. And that would be myself included. The church was very supportive in all structural levels and does continue to be very supportive. But there were those instances that I wished I wasn't a part of. And a simple example would be how in the previous society I worshipped in before my dad passed, I'd be sitting in the local preachers' quarterly meeting and I was referred to this whole time as Mr. Lysia, as Brother Lysia. But after my dad passed, members of the meeting, including the minister himself, started unashamedly referring to me as Omolem in my first name. But the point is not realizing how these relationships that we had formed with people we worshipped with, even though we were involved in the church, were superficial. But even in spaces where it is not organizational or where it is organizational in the church, you are constantly reminded that you are under your father's shadow. It is your father who mattered. What matters is no longer there. You are nothing and we will address you as we wish. By virtue of being the minister's child, you are robbed of your individuality. And so these traumas are amongst many that in the process, ironically build us in the sense of constantly causing ourselves to remember who we are. And as Mom Greta McCrankle mentioned when she was speaking on the life of a spouse, to design our own craft. And as such, it is particularly painful for ministers' children because they are not given the capes that our mothers receive, and they have no obligation whatsoever to serve in the shadow of their fathers. But this shadow is imposed on them even when they are not the outcasts that society expects them to be. So it's important for members of the church as well to, in the very same light, when they expect the minister and his wife or the minister and her husband to be like a father and a mother to them as congregants, to in the same light treat the minister's children like they would like their own to be treated. Because these children who love their father, love journeying with them, but see this house that is called the church as a problem, may have to know that they are never alone. Secondly, what may shock some people, however, is how my father's ministry also brought me to the point of being peaceful and accepting of my own sexual orientation. I'm an openly gay man and who was raised by a father who was constantly counseling those serving in the police and happened to include those who could not live their lives as open as they wanted because of the prejudice and violent acts by some police women and policemen. And in working together with psychologists, he would directly interact with them. And he came to a point where he said to me, I know what you go through, and I will not let you go through that alone. And so at some point, I then realized that his ministry allowed, or rather the fruits of his ministry allowed me to go beyond the limitations of society and even of the church itself, as many of us are expected to live our lives freely, but not make a noise about it. It's a reality that is prevalent in the Methodist Church. And on the 9th of August, 2018, I still remember the date, he said to me, live your life and be free. Do not be apologetic and do not think that your sexuality will stand in the way of you candidating for the ministry if that is the route you ever feel that you need to go to. I asked him what he would do for the LGBTQI community when he was back in the congregational setting as he was meant to go back to circuit in 2021. And he said to me, Umulem, I will take the necessary steps that it takes to conscientize these people, but you must be patient with me. Because firstly of all, these people can be very quick to threaten me with my stipend when they feel uncomfortable. Secondly, others amongst them are willing to listen, but because of their past experiences, they are unable to and cannot necessarily participate in this conversation. And thirdly, who are you to force them to accept you when it took your own parents a long time to come to that point themselves? And so in that sense, I can say our father's the ministry of our fathers hurts us deeply, but can also sometimes shape how we see the need to find purpose in the personal challenges that we face. Remembering that just as their call was not about them, but about God, we can also use our challenges to build, to inspire, to heal, to transform, and even take us to the point of relating our call to ministry in whatever form that ministry can take. And in conclusion, the last thing that I would like to mention is that it is up to ministers to embrace their children in such a way that they feel proud to be a part of your journey in ministry, despite the certain gaps in your personal relationship. After every service that my father conducted, especially Holy Communion services, those are where he would mostly conduct them, he would sit me down. My mother and my brother knew that between 5:30 and 7, if they're having a conversation that over 30 minutes, it's about today's service. And by the time he gets to me, he's already been drilled by my mother about how the service happened. But when he's sitting down with me, he is getting the congregant's perspective.
Brother Lucia, we're missing you there. Brother Lucia? We seem to have lost Umulimo a little bit. It most probably is network connections. Whilst we are trying to get him back, we will note that here is another story of a minister's child who talks about a childhood interrupted. A childhood, I would probably even say, a bit stolen. Having your father as a frontliner, having to check or read the mood before you speak to your father.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. You're back. Yes. We lost you
Okay.
for a bit there. You were concluding.
Yes. And I was saying, and so ministry was not just a burden or a heavy yoke on our shoulders, as Abantwana Basemission, but on the positive side, it became a conversation through which we saw the grace of God in many ways. And so my plea would be to ministers, irrespective of the personal gap, the personal relationship that may have a lot of gaps with your children. Take time to reflect with them, take time to be creative and make them feel a part of your journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Lucia. I'm also glad to note that in addition to the hardships that you have pointed out, being a child of the Manse, is that this is not a single story. You have given us the positives, that in the hardships that you went through, you were able to see the grace of God. I've picked up a few points to engage on during the discussion, but for now, we will head on to another speaker for the night, Solofetso Kitabile, who will introduce herself and then enter into her presentation for the evening. Over to you, Solofetso.
Thank you, Osritabile. First and foremost, I'd like to greet everyone who is a part of this conversation and those who are also participating on Facebook. I'm not going to go into an intro about who I am, but like Osritabile said, my name is Solofetso Kitabile, and I am also a minister's child. What I want to do in this conversation is bring quite a few different perspectives into the conversation. Because I believe if we're going to talk about something, let's talk about it in its entirety. So both of my parents are Methodist ministers. They got ordained, they got married, and then went on to have children. And one thing that they have always done as parents is to constantly drill into our heads that their calling is not our calling. So as we navigate this thing called life, it is important for us to try and discover what it is our purpose is and what it is we have been called to do. I think watching two people who essentially have chosen to be in the same field has also allowed me to understand that we need to respect the way in which people do what they do. And there has never been a conflict in how they do things, but more of an acceptance that I have a way that I do things. I have been called to do my ministry in a particular way. And there's no need for us to essentially try to dumb each other down or even to compete. So that is one of the positive things that I have gained out of being a minister's child. I remember as a 13 or 14-year-old, one of the most vivid memories I have as a minister's child is on a Sunday when I accompanied my mother to a communion service. Now, I say accompany because we were given the choice as to whether or not we want to go to church, and also we were given a choice as to where we want to go to church. So we were not limited to the Methodist church. On this particular Sunday, I'm going to the communion service, I'm wearing my pants, I don't have anything on my head. And for me, it was not a big deal because if my mother and my father don't have a problem with the way that I'm dressed, quite frankly, there's nothing that anybody else can say to me. So I felt safe because I knew that they had my back. So I go and I go to receive communion. I'm with my cousin. She's wearing a dress, nothing on her head either. We go to receive communion and, you know, there's a bit of a commotion happening. There are scarves flying in the air. And the gentleman who was helping my mother with the communion goes to find a tissue paper to put onto somebody's head. So as my mom lifts up her head, in that moment, she said, you stop it and you stop it now, or you come to take over. And what I learned in that particular moment is that when a need arises for you to put your foot down, do so unapologetically, irrespective of where you are, irrespective of who is there. If there's a need to put your foot down and be very firm in what your stance is, do it. My passion for fighting against injustices, even when those injustices don't affect me, is something that has been nurtured in the church through watching my parents do what they do. We have always in our home been given the space to express ourselves freely and also to express ourselves where we want to express ourselves and how. So I've never felt like I need to be two different people. If my mother has accepted me the way that I am, if my father has accepted me the way that I am, I'm going to be consistent, whether I'm in the church, outside of the church, at school, or in the community. So, you know, whenever you go out and somebody will come to you and say, hey, no, it's fine. And if you need me to, I can give you their numbers because they know where I am right now. Very early on also, I became very sober-minded and learned to manage my expectations of people who call themselves Christians. Because a lot of the times we go to church, these people are Christians, and the assumption is we all share the same values, we all share the same principles, and that is not true. You can sit in a church service, be next to people who are completely shredding your mother or father to bits and pieces, and all of a sudden you stand up, hey, we would like to introduce Mwana Murti Mang Mang, and all of a sudden instead, oh, hey, Mwana Murti, hey, waiting, nice to see you, great, and already you develop a thick skin, but also the ability to tell people what you really feel at that point in time. And if my feeling is, because I have heard you engaging in those kind of conversations, I don't feel like we need to pretend with one another. So you do you, and I'll do me, and I'll continue. And I do appreciate the fact that what they have always done is allowed us to speak our minds. So it has never been a situation where if somebody is disrespectful, whether that person is older, whether that person is in a high position, if somebody is disrespectful, it is more than okay to call them out on that. Umolemo spoke about the capes that a lot of ministers' wives receive. And I remember a few years ago, a minister's wife told me that when she was given her cape, she was told that this cape is used to hide the sins and transgressions of your husband. So irrespective of what he does, irrespective of whether or not he may or may not be hurting you, where now your job with this cape is to hide all of that. And it really made me realize the pressure that sometimes ministers' children experience in trying to protect the image of their parents. So if there is an unhappiness that I am experiencing in the household, I'm not going to express that because I'm worried for about what and whether or not that is going to taint my father or mother's image. Parents are the front line when it comes to defending their children. And this is all parents. And sometimes what happens in the church is that people will disrespect you to your face. And there have been instances where I've seen ministers' children being disrespected in front of their parents and their parents not saying anything about it. And I've come to the realization that there's a part in them that dies in that moment. The first thought is, I'm not worthy of your protection. But the second thought is, it is, and this is something to come. And like I said, this is something that a lot of children experience in the homes. Now, we all know that there are people who are the celebrity ministers in the church. You know, the ones who are the great preachers, the ones who are the great singers. And sometimes ministers get caught up in that celebrity to the point where they overextend themselves to the detriment of their families. Now, what happens in the mind of a child who is experiencing that or who is seeing that. In the mind of a child is the church is taking my father or mother away from me. The church is robbing me of a chance to spend time, quality time with my parent. Well, in actual fact, sometimes there is an inability to prioritize the family. I must say this, ministers are hurting as well. They also go through pain. They also get hurt by the church. And it is necessary in order for them to become emotionally and mentally available for their families. It is important for them to also go through their own healing. And sometimes that healing is not going to take place in the church. People come to church to get their cups filled. When as a Muruti, you need to find other ways in order to fill your cup. Otherwise, we end up in a situation where so many ministers' children end up inheriting the wounds of their parents. I also think there's a need for the Methodist Church to put family at the center. I've made an observation that you will have a father in the home who is a YMG member, a mother who is a women's member, and a child who's part of the Wesley Guild. These people live in the same car, they're headed in the same direction to the very same church. But what happens when they get to the door of the church? The need for there to be a focus on the strengthening of families in a spiritual context. Now, in closing, I want to say this, and I feel very strongly about this. As a minister's child, I have been hurt. I do, however, recognize that the church has hurt many people. And as much as my pain and my experience comes from a different and unique perspective, it would be wrong for me to say that as a minister's child, my pain is heavier than your pain. My pain runs deeper than your pain, because this is not a competition. To see is to strive to become a community of healers. I don't know the pain of being a member of the LGBTI community and feeling like I cannot be myself fully in the church. I don't know the pain of falling pregnant outside of marriage and being shamed by the church. And these people have a right to their experiences as well. So we need to accept and respect people's experiences, even though we may not understand them, even though we may not relate, and to become empathetic so that we can truly stand with one another in each other's times of need and darkness. Thank you.
Thank you, Solofeto. And thank you very much for taking us through this insightful journey. And I'm more appreciative of the perspectives that you brought to the table, as I am with everybody else's perspectives. But in particular, I noted how you spoke about a modeling of unity your parents modeled for you, and the freedom of speech and the freedom of choice, and how you were, so to speak, liberated from early on, in that they told you that their calling is not your calling. And with that, I have also noted a couple of pointers to move with into the discussion. And the next speaker we will head on to is Rebotile Nkumise, who is our dearly beloved sister in the Lord, who will also introduce herself and take us through her journey and her presentation, as we have heard from the previous speaker. Over to you, Rebotile.
Thank you, Ritabile. Let me greet you all this evening, all that are on the Zoom platform, as well as those that are watching on Facebook. I am Rebotile Nkumise. I am the daughter of the late Reverend Nkumise. I'm not going to go too much with introductions. My fellow PKs have already said a mouthful. And they've covered, okay, I will add on from what they have said as well. and share just a little bit from my experience as well. There are those people who in the church and outside of the church that refuse to accept your existence as Rebotile, the individual. And they choose and insist on only knowing you as ngwana bishopo kapa ngwana moruti. This takes away your individuality as a PK. And in some cases, some of them make it their life's mission to make a place where you find peace and joy. They make it unbearable to worship and serve in peace. They turn it into a toxic space for you. And this is this all in because ntatwa hao kapa mme wa hao and falls into trust issues. You struggle to trust people easily because not only do you have those that are gunning for you to fall and they make you feel small and unwanted and inadequate, you get those that are also, they get close to you because they think you are the stairway to heaven by virtue of daddy being a minister. And basically they refuse to take you out of the shadow of your parents. They refuse to see you as anything but ngwana moruti. And for me, I always have my guard up. I always have my guard up. It makes it difficult to make friends and to be comfortable with some people because you always have to watch what you say, you watch what you do as a PK, because someone is always watching, someone is always judging. But it's very lonely. It is, for me, I came to a point where so you are making it unbearable for me to worship and serve in peace in a place that I really enjoy. Then you draw closer to God in a way. For me, I drew closer to God, and I had, in my loneliness, living in my loneliness, I found a friendship with God. And basically, for like, after all is said and done, when you have nothing left and you have like nothing, no one, you know the person who's got your back is God. And that makes it easier for you as an individual, not only as a PK, but everyone. It makes it easier for you to hold your head up high and move on and be your own person. Now for PKs, we didn't choose ministry. We didn't choose ministry. My father has a calling, he goes into ministry. He chooses my mother to be his companion in this ministry. And now you come in later in life a little bit as a child, you are joining them in their journey as well. There's a space for your father there's a space for your father in his ministry, and there is a space for your mother. And then the children are left out a little bit in the cold, unintentionally by their parents. And this has, I came together with Umulimo le Tebolo Morokan. We came together and we decided to create a sort of safe space for Methodist PKs, where there is no judgment, where there is no guilt about talking and doing whatever you want to do as a PK. and a healing space, because there's a lot of pain. PKs go through a lot of pain. There's a lot of heartache. There's a lot of anger as well that we experience. And just to make it clear, my experience will never be the same as another's. But at some point, we do come to a common ground, and there is somewhere where we can relate as PKs. So the sacred space that we've also created, which is the Methodist kids retreat, we had one this past Saturday, the first one. It is also a healing space, spiritually, psychologically. We talk about our experiences, but we also realize that we need to go beyond talking about our experiences, because we can't keep rehatching wounds the whole time and repeat ourselves. We going forward with talking about our experiences and all of that, we create a fellowship between us, and we connect. We create relationships between us as PKs, because you never know. You never know, Guti. I think our parents, there comes a time where there are situations where, say, our parents, ministers, they don't get along. They don't get along.
Apologies, Rebotile. I just need
Yes.
to ask Tseleng to please mute your mic. We can hear everything happening in your kitchen, and it's interrupting Rebotile as she speaks. Tseleng, can you kindly mute your mic? Thank you. Apologies for that, Rebo. You can continue.
Not a problem. Thank you. There are situations where we inherit our parents' beefs with other. They say our parents don't get along. Mine or Tulu or whoever's parents don't get along. In the journey. It's an opportunity, and I never know what can happen. If there is some common, as PKs can you can connect and get along. Let's make that possible for everyone. This is not just for our generation, but for the ones that are coming on after us, because every generation is different. Some have had it worse than us, some have had it better. Not everything in this journey is negative. Not everything is bad. There are some positives to this. Ritabile, I think that is all I have for now. If any of the fellow PKs want to add anything, they are welcome to as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebo. Now I think we get on to the good part, the conversation. We've all heard from you individually and your unique experiences. I would like to also ask you to have your videos on so that we can engage some points into detail, because there were common points raised among you. And the first thing I would like to talk about, I didn't hear Utulu speak about that. I'm not sure if Umulemo touched on it, but being a child whose father was in the chaplaincy, I don't know about the moving about and the stations, how do they work? Perhaps Umulemo will take us through that. But Uput Bwangani touched deeply on the traumas incurred as your parents change stations and you get to navigate these different spaces. I'm quite interested in how the space and your bodies engage with these change of environments and these pains and these traumas and so forth. So I would like to hear from you individually into, let us into that experience, and not just into that experience into the negatives, but what a future church looks like when we look at the stationing of ministers. What are you hoping for? What is, like Sis Oribotile said, that we are doing this, we are having these discussions for those that are coming after us, who are younger than us. And by us, I mean you guys as PKs. What then can you say the world that you desire is, but speaking from the traumas of changing stations? Anyone can start. I'll throw it on you, Tulu. Oh, sorry, brother, you can pick it up.
The trauma of changing stations, I think now they are much better when you look on the child's education. With us, it was a very bad scenario, a very difficult situation, because as I've indicated earlier on, you will go from one station where you speak a particular language and the culture and the customs are in this particular way. And you tend then for be changed to another area. Your first 2-3 months as a child of the PK in that area, you won't be able to converse with anyone because you'll be speaking different languages. But as I'm indicating, it's better now because English has been used as the media of communication than any other thing. But you know, the sad part of the whole thing, it's when your father or your parents are being changed as a station and there is no further communication to the child to say, look, we are moving and you know, in time, so emotionally you can be able to, you know, adjust yourself. Emotionally you can say goodbyes to your friends. And that's the other reason why we don't have friends as PKs, because you can't make friends everywhere you go. It's different characters of different people whom always we looked at as thinking they are Christians.
Sis Tulu?
Yes, you know, I love what Okutibongani just said. He spoke about if, you know, one can be communicated to, but this is what's happening, we're moving. So there's somewhat of a preparation that happens. I think another thing is, there is a need for families to develop small cultures that they can carry with them from one station to the next station. So even if your environment changes, you know that 2 or 3 days out of the week, there's going to be a family supper. 2-3 days out of the week, there's going to be a family meeting or a check-in. How are you doing? How are you feeling? What's happening at school? If you know, the child was at a school where there's soccer and they're now at a school where there's no soccer, what can we do to make a plan so that there's something that remains consistent irrespective of where the family finds themselves?
Umulimo?
Sorry, Rutabile, can you just repeat the question again?
I was asking if you have any experience with the changing stations at all, and speaking from the traumas thereof, what could have been, in fact, what solutions then can we draw from that, and what experiences have you had specifically with moving stations, if at all you have?
Okay, I've never specifically had that experience, that challenge of moving stations. In the different areas that my father moved in serving as chaplain, I was blessed enough and fortunate enough to be in one specific area till the day he passed away. But given from what I've drawn from other experiences of other ministers' kids, I would just allude to what Solu was saying, is that when there's consistency in how a certain routine is followed in the family life, then you are able to understand when it changes a bit in terms of adapting to a new station, and understand that, you know what, we just got here, we still need to understand the way of life here, but nothing has changed in the meantime. And that allows you to have a positive view in terms of how you adapt yourself as well when it comes to school, when it comes to making new friends. I've come across ministers' kids who would be there 1 year, and all of a sudden they are told that we are moving. And it would be very negative for them, but it would not be as negative when they would find themselves having parents that are used to communicating, having parents that know the days on which, like Chulu mentioned, where they would necessarily communicate that this is our day, this is our time, and knowing that the family unit is strong enough to survive whatever that may come and interrupt the journey.
All right. Uribotile will not be engaging on this one. I'm hearing across all three of you that child empowerment is important, that children be included in the moving, be informed and prepared, and that the family structure be somewhat stable internally, because it will always move. Be stable internally in that there are checks and balances, that 3 days a week, there's a family dinner, or there will be a check-in. But you also spoke about something that is has been a common theme across your stories, unspoken loss, the violences that were inflicted upon you, the alienation, which read as numbness or a forced acceptance of situations that you have gone through, a silencing and an anger and a policing of your beings and your bodies. How has that manifested into your adulthood? I know that Uribotile mentioned something about now being careful who she befriends, who she speaks to. And I imagine that is not an easy life. How have these experiences, particularly the negative ones, manifested in your adulthood? How do they impact you now? Or how have you dealt with them? The question is to all of you.
Yeah. Okay. If I have to answer that from my point of view or from my side, you know, when those situations manufactured or they were there, one, as you have indicated, to another or you will find yourself isolated. But you know that isolation that you will get into, the one thing that you will come out with is God. You come out there knowing who's God. You normally would come out there knowing what their father or your parents are called into. You start being able to sing the song Kaili Kai Mokiriang Kinali Jesu Kaili Kai. You understand when it's been said the Lord is my shepherd. And all that comes from that point, that derived corner that you were left alone. I think for me, that one particular thing that has actually made me to be the man I am today, it's the YMG. I joined the YMG at the age of 15 years, which I've got 34 years as a member of the YMG. I'm serving as in the Central Executive, Synod, as member of the YMG. And the good thing is I'm not serving as only one PK in that executive. There is another PK in that executive. So it tells you that there is a God where we are. And when it's being said, the Lord is my shepherd, we always are there. And God, we trust God more than any other thing. And that's one thing that I will always say. My parents, if abang nigezalona, gumazi nokumthanda nokumlondoloza uNkulunkulu. And alikho elinye ilifa engabuye ngikhalele ngaphandle leli lokuba abanginike lona lilifa lempilo yonke kimi.
Thank you, Brother Bongani. Ribotile.
Yes, Rutabile. Oh, can you just repeat the question?
Oh,
again? Sorry.
okay. So I was asking in terms of these performances that you've had to live through.
manifested into your adulthood?
Can the person whose volume is on please mute their mic? What I was asking Orebotile is, we've spoken about these traumas of moving stations. We've spoken about the silencing and the alienation and these losses and so forth. But I wanted to find out how have you dealt with them, or how are they manifesting now as into your adulthood? Are they still an impacting factor, or have you found ways to mitigate them?
By always having my guard up.
Even that, we can even delve into that.
Okay. I like, as a PK now, I've been told by other older PKs, but be careful who you befriend, especially within the church, because not everyone has good intentions. Some of them befriend you and they are not honest, ne? They are not honest, but they batla o tlisetsa ditaba tsa batho to you, ne? Le tla sheba batho between the two of you. You are not 100% sure as to what they are saying when you are not with them at the same time. I don't know if I'm making sense. I am very careful with who I get close to. And a lot of people have said to me that I'm stuck up when they first meet me. I'm very stuck up. I'm a snob, I'm whatever. And only once some of them have spoken to me and have gotten to know me, I get comfortable once I'm familiar with you. Then, only then do people realize, oh no, Ganti, she's like this. I thought, you know, and at the same time, they yeah, man, I don't know what else to say, Ritabile, honestly.
Thank you very much. It's okay. I'll hear from the other PKs if they want to add on, or we can move on to the next question.
If I can just speak from my perspective. First of all, I didn't say whose child I am. So my father is Reverend Dr. Kenalwane Kitabile, and my mother is Reverend Dr. Jipuseng Lebaka Kitabile. And anybody who knows my mother knows that, let me go somewhere else. You cannot be my mother's child and see the way that people respond to her when she speaks up for the truth, hear the things that people say about her when she speaks up for the truth, and not develop a thick skin. So if there's one thing I have developed just through observation, is developing a thick skin. And also understanding not everybody is going to like you. If everybody likes you, there's a problem, because there's a part of you that is too accommodating of everybody that is coming into your life. And just having a strong sense of self and being able to stand alone when nobody else wants to stand with you. And Shame, I don't want to lie. Now, listen, I'll give you nothing more than 5 seconds. If I feel like it's nonsense, I'm gone. Because I simply feel like I deserve better. So there are things that I just simply don't. If I smell that there's a problem, I'm out.
That is very interesting, and particularly for a young woman in the church, because there are many labels, there would be many labels attached to that. And my particular interest as a woman, how have you, or is it still with a strong sense of self and the thick skin? What have been those that hit home and you're like, ouch?
I think the most painful thing that anyone has said to me in the church is, number one, what too much did you say? What did he say to me? I can't really remember. I think that, look, and I can't say it was really hurtful because, look, for me to be compared to my mother, for me, it's like, great, wow, she's a great woman. So if I'm like her, it's fine. And you do realize that when, as a woman, when you are quick to call out nonsense or you are quick to put your foot down, a lot of people find that problematic. But like you said earlier, there's a lot of modeling that I experienced in the home. And as strong as my mother is, my father has never had a fragile male ego where he feels like, hey, what are you saying, woman? I'm the man, you need to respect me. So look, at the end of the day, the world is going to be the world. And as my father says, it's part of the package of being a human being. And there are moments where you say, but why can't people just accept me the way that I am? And I always go back to, if my parents have accepted me and I have a personal relationship with God, and God knows that he has created the woman that I am today.
I applaud how your parents have built your character through deliberate intention and observation. Umulimo, you also spoke about how your father affirmed you and enabled you to be openly yourself. And I would think that as also a form of modeling a personhood that is firstly innately acceptable and inwardly acceptable, but externally and beyond, one can stand within their truth. What would be the advice, particularly, that you give to parent ministers in handling, guiding, and molding their children in the home, in the church, as a child of a minister yourself, from your lived experience?
Okay, that is a very broad question. But firstly of all, what I saw my father do is to recognize, he recognized this gap. What happens is that you're done as a mission, but there's this sense of people forgetting that at that very same society. So what my father would do is that he identified this, if I could call it a gap, and he said there were moments when he would say, your experience of church, by virtue of you being my son and journeying with me in this ministry, the experiences that you come across also contribute to how I see my ministry become relevant each and every day. Because what you experience is no different to what another child of any congregant experiences. And I saw him use my experiences within the church and with my sexuality, like you mentioned, to want to understand and dig deeper and have a deeper culture of listening, of engaging the realities of the church. Because now there's this dichotomy of the church being in conversation about the LGBTQI community, where you have ministers themselves who have children who are not open about their sexualities, and some of those very same ministers being homophobic without knowing whom they are crushing in their own home. And on another hand, you have people like my father, who unfortunately did not write this, who unfortunately did not necessarily communicate this, who came across such people by having one-on-one conversations with them and getting to the point of deep listening to be able to relate to the story of his child and to the story of many others whom he invites to the means of grace. So I think what's important, the firstly of all, is for ministers to sometimes consider their children in light of their experiences and how that is a reflection of their own ministry, how that is a reflection of how they've been fulfilling their parental role in terms of their children understanding what church is, but also what the family is supposed to be, despite what the church has done and what they've experienced. And like I said, and I would always emphasize this, make them feel proud to be a part of your journey. Because from that, I drew the importance of deep listening, engaging people's experiences before I exert my view, and coming to realize that because of the different contexts that we come from, we also don't even see church the same. Even when we refer to the church as a safe space, as a home, we do not view it the same, especially in light of what we experience also as PKs. But when we come to the point of listening and hearing, we still continue to be that fellowship of believers. So if ministers could do that, we could have more healthy relationships with our parents and how we view the church as well.
Thank you, Umolemo. We've spoken a lot about the pains and the strengths that you guys took from the pains that you experienced. But can we talk briefly about the privilege of being PKs? What privilege do you guys have, and how has privilege manifested also in your day-to-day, be it in the church? Because when we began, we said this was not going to be a single story. We're going to be broad about our truth. What have been the blessings of being a minister's child, apart from the character building pains that you went through? Anybody can pick the question up, or I can point. Brother Bongani, would you like to take that one on?
I don't know how to answer this one, Tabile, because when you say privileges of being a PK, in my experience, I don't know whether when you say you are the first one in the queue for lunch, or you are always being introduced in the church, or you will always get a chair or a seat in front. It doesn't matter how full the church is. Does that fall under the privileges? But the only privilege that I know for a fact as a PK would be when your parents move, you will get the school, even if it's not the same language as what you were studying, or even if you're not going to get. So I don't know whether, again, must I actually put this in the bracket of being a privilege, where you'll get what you want, but not exactly what you would want, as compared to other people. So yeah, from my point of view, I don't know any privilege except those being able to get a seat when the church is full, or being introduced consistently. I don't know whether the introduction was for him to be nominated as being mocked, but yeah, there isn't. I haven't seen any.
I will engage on that, Brother Bongani, but I have quite a few questions that elaborate on this, or that speak to privilege specifically. Mokhomotsi Dutlileng on Facebook says, not taking anything away from what everyone is saying, I wish we had a speaker whose brief was to speak about the blessings and advantages of being a minister's child, because truth is, there are many and weighty, and we always talk about those here at home, and thank God. So perhaps when you look at it, Brother Bongani, you could look at it as the advantages that you've had, or the advantages over others, or with yourself in jail, like you were saying, being able to get into a school that you would otherwise not, had you not been a minister's child, is a privilege for one, or an advantage that you probably have over other kids. And
I think the privilege probably, I think that didn't hear me, but I did indicate that the most privilege ever that I got was as a PK to know God. You are always in the front line of getting the word of God. When people are devoted, when people are being converted, you are always in that front line. So either or, the most privilege that you could get it's to be next to God. That's why I was saying it makes you understand the Lord is my shepherd. It makes you understand that those are the privileges that you will always get as a son of the minister or as a child of the minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Bongani. Chulu, you can still touch on the question of privilege, but there's a specific question for you from Facebook. It reads, Sis Chulu, what suggestions could you bring in reimagining the church, especially on how the young children get to be taught emotional intelligence, understanding intellect, and also have psychological support from educational psychologists, etc., for children of ministers to be open-minded?
Okay. The first one, as far as privilege goes, I think from a very early age, I have learned that there's a difference between religious and being spiritual. So for me, that is one of the main advantages that really, for me, I think has meant a lot throughout my life. As far as my suggestions around empowering young children, I think you need to start bringing in people who have the capacity to work with those things, to work with those issues. There's so many, I just believe that, there is a lack of a collaboration between so many organizations. So try and identify an organization in your area, or reach out to someone who you feel might be able to help you with that particular issue. But I think it's important to, when you talk about the empowering of children, you need to be very clear on what do you mean when you say empowering. I always like to say, when it comes to children, some of these things you need to practice. So for example, what do you do when somebody comes and grabs you? So you start teaching the child how to react in a moment of being attacked. So there are very, very simple ways of starting to empower children. And some of those ways are not necessarily the big and the most complicated ways, but you need to identify when I say I want to empower, what do I actually mean? So if you want children who are able to express their feelings, you can start a smaller Nyanya group and say, you know what, today we just want you to talk. What is happening at school? What is happening in the home? What are you noticing on the street corners? What are the things that scare you? So that they can begin to talk and realize that they're actually people who care, people who actually want to hear them.
Thank you.
I hope I answered the question.
Thank you, Sis Tulu. If you haven't, we can take the conversation onto Facebook, because that is where it was asked. For now, we need to wrap up. We are behind on time, and we apologize for being over time. And therefore, before I do my closing remarks, I would like if you guys can say some things to close, people who haven't spoken, like Omolemo or Ribotile. And in the meantime, ask Umam Greta to prepare a closing prayer for us whilst you guys speak.
Okay. Yes, Khatabile, brothers and sisters, I think in closing, what I would want to just touch on, it actually does answer some of the engagements we had on Facebook that we could not all engage, unfortunately. But I can attest that there were advantages in terms of the ministry that we all experience differently because our contexts are not the same. Just Bloemfontein alone, for me, just Bloemfontein alone, going to these different sections and societies with my father, because of tribalism that existed back then, you find that they were separated according to tribalism, and you learn the different cultures and how it has infused with the worship there. So you would learn different forms of worship and see how they are practiced according to each culture, and see how it's unique to different communities, and where the church is also the anchor of the community as well. There are a lot of benefits from this. And why I'm mentioning it, and I'm about to also mention the question about the retreat. The retreat was the first in our area, organized by us. And just to say, this is the start of many more. There isn't necessarily a structure to say that there are retreats going on for ministers, kids, and so forth. But the retreat was the start of saying, you do not need to go to street corner that is right across by Centenary Methodist Church to claim your individuality. This is the space for you to do so. This is the space for you to engage the psychological traumas that you have encountered, and this is the space where we will have psychologically trained professionals to engage with us in these intimate moments. And that is something that we are continuing to strategize on as the group that organized this retreat, and even communicating with other ministers that were impressed with the initiative. But it is also a space to say, even no matter what the church has done to you, the essence of your spirituality remains important. How you relate to this Jesus that you see your father serve only to be heard by congregants is still important, because he still speaks to you, he still uses you, he still loves you. And that is important because we then reflect on all aspects. We then reflect on how our perspectives change, both positively and negatively, when we'd be sitting in the middle of a leaders' meeting and seeing how our fathers would navigate 500 different personalities in one room, and seeing how that was used for the good of the church, no matter how people from the church taking their own personal matters from society and bringing into them would want to cause detriment for the church's mission and its missional perspective. So those are the kind of spaces we want to create, safe spaces, where we also don't find ourselves just saying, you know what, we're going to Durban for a retreat, but we don't want to find ourselves just playing more than we are engaging. It is an intimate, safe space where ministers' kids reveal, or not reveal, but disclose about the traumas that they have experienced, the positives, navigating the gaps between the two, and saying, we are still ourselves. I mean, if it is just the four of us today, how many are there? With the number of ministers we have in the connection, and with the ministers we have upcoming, with how many of them that are supposed to be collared now not having stations. The context and the situations are changing, meaning the reality is not going to change anytime soon. And in organizing such safe spaces, we say we need the church's backing, we need the church's funding, because nothing happens without money. But that will be communicated properly on the right platforms and in the right structures. But we are saying we are moving, and we can still continue to enjoy life as PKs. Thank you.
Ribotile, any last words? Well then, that is my cue to say thank you to an incredible panel that has given us only a gist or a tip of the iceberg into what the journey of a minister's child looks like. And I hope this has offered us the space and time to reflect on how we have been treating them, speaking to them, engaging with them in different platforms. And I hope that this has enabled us then to remember their humanity and their personhood, to allow ministers' children, to be people, to be individuals, and to also exercise and partake in this free will that we've all been given by God. And I hope that moving on and moving forward, we have taken the pointers that the ministers' children have deliberated upon. I know on Facebook there are people who have said we need debriefing or counseling for ministers' children, and there has been other comments that say the church has been unfair. But we've looked at many elements and many facets, problematizing the parenting, problematizing the church, and also talking about privilege, albeit we didn't delve into it deeper. But I hope that this is the first of many conversations where PKs are offered an ear, are offered a space, and the church gets to reflect, especially congregants, on how we treat ministers' children and how we enter the mission house and how we treat them as they change stations and navigate. But I'm sure that we were not alone. There were parents with us who were listening in and who were hearing as the minister's children were speaking. And therefore, I would like to ask again Umam Greta to speak to us and offer closing prayers as well. But for everyone else, thank you very much and good night. You've been an amazing audience. You've been an amazing panel. God bless you, and to many more such conversations. Thank you.
Thank
Over
you.
to you,
Thanks
Ma.
to the Thanks to the panel for such a fired up conversation. We've learned quite a lot. Thank you so much. Masithandaze. Thixo wethu mzali wethu uthembekile ezimpilweni zethu. Usithembisile mzali wethu, you've promised to heal the brokenhearted and those broken in spirit. And we now rest assured in the comfort of your word for their healing. Mzali wethu omhle kangaka. Sibulela Thixo wethu ukuthi wena you've planted us in different spaces for different reasons. Reveal to every child your purpose ngobomi bakhe. Give him or her faith deep enough and hope to live out your purpose ngobomi bakhe, mzali wethu omhle kangakanani. Let no obstacle make him or her divert from the plans onazo ngobomi bakhe, mzali wethu odume kangaka. They are a gift to us as parents. They are a gift to the church. They are a gift to the communities. Yenza ke Thixo wethu that the anger, the frustration that comes with their experiences does not blind them from the goodness of the Lord, does not blind them from the purpose that you have, ngobomi babo, mzali wethu, does not blind them from the fact that they have to impact the spaces abakuzo in a positive way. Thixo wethu odume ngokulunga, siyayazi Thixo wethu okokuba babuhlungu kwezinye indawo, kodwa mzali wethu sithembile okokuba your grace is sufficient to pull them through, mzali wethu. You've located them, Thixo wam, nangalo mzuzu kwade kwaleli thuba, for you are a loving God, mzali wethu omhle kangakanana. Let them go into the world, not to display their scars, but to show the world the stars that wena njengoThixo omane uzibeka ebomini babo despite everything. Hlala ke nabantwana bethu, hlale nabantwana belizwe lethu bebonke. Uyayazi Thixo wethu, there are kids who are more scarred than them, and they have no platforms to express their feelings and their experiences. They die silently in corners. Iba nguThixo kubo, iba ngumzali kubo, ubabalo lwakho malubalande. Thixo wethu odume ngokulunga. Thank you for such conversations that are windows for us as parents, windows for other kids. Babone ukuthi what goes on ngaphakathi. Sometimes we overlook these things as minor things. Kanti Thixo wethu zinobuzaza ezimpilweni babantwana bethu. Hlala wena njengoThixo ube nguThixo kubo. Womeleza amakhaya ethu. Give them resilience, Thixo wethu, to stand up ebomini, to show up ebomini. Ezintweni zonke balibulele ufefe lwakho, mzali wethu odume ngokulunga. Enkosi ngoba nguThixo ezimpilweni zethu. Hlala nabo ubagqume uhambe nabo ezindleleni zabo. Ilizwi lakho libe sisibane senyawo zabo. Thixo wethu sikelela ilifa nekamva labo egameni nasegazini kaYesu Kristu Nkosi yethu. Amen.
Amen. Siyabulela, Mama. Thank you and good night, everyone.
Good night.